I'm pregnant. Stella's voice carried across the dining table at Mom's house, bright with excitement. Everyone erupted in congratulations. My husband Lance jumped up to hug her, holding on just a second too long. I watched his hand linger on her back, watched her lean into him with familiar ease. Something cold settled in my stomach. Around us, Mom was already talking about baby showers, and Dad was refilling champagne glasses. But I couldn't stop staring at how comfortable they looked together, how Lance's smile seemed different when he looked at my younger sister. 28 years old and finally pregnant after trying for 2 years, Stella glowed with happiness. Lance returned to his seat beside me, squeezing my hand absently. His attention stayed fixed on Stella across the table. She met his eyes and smiled, a private smile that didn't include anyone else in the room. I took a sip of water, my throat suddenly dry. The celebration continued around me, but I felt distant from it, watching my family through glass. When had Lance started looking at my sister that way? Or had I simply never noticed before? The evening stretched on, full of laughter and plans, while that cold feeling in my stomach grew heavier with each passing moment. My name is Helena Mercer. I'm 35 years old, and until 3 months ago, I thought I had a good life. Lance and I had been married for 8 years. We'd met at a charity fundraiser where I was coordinating volunteers, and he was representing his architecture firm. He'd seemed steady, reliable, ambitious. We'd bought a house in Riverside 2 years into our marriage, the kind with a white fence and room for the children we'd planned to have someday. I worked as an event coordinator for Grandview Hotels, managing conferences and corporate retreats. The job kept me traveling twice a month, sometimes for a week at a time. Lance never complained about my schedule. Now I understood why. Stella was 7 years younger than me, the baby of the family who'd always gotten extra attention. She'd moved back to Riverside last year after a failed engagement, taking a job as a pharmaceutical sales representative. She'd been around constantly, joining us for dinners, dropping by unexpectedly, borrowing things from our house. I'd encouraged it, happy to support my sister through a difficult time. I'd been so stupidly, blindly trusting. That night after Mom's dinner party, I lay awake while Lance slept beside me. His phone buzzed on the nightstand. Once, twice, 3 times, at 2 in the morning. The next morning, I made coffee while Lance showered. His phone sat on the kitchen counter where he'd left it. I'd never snooped before, never had a reason to. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up. The lock screen showed 3 messages from S with a heart emoji. I knew his passcode, our anniversary. I opened the messages and my world tilted sideways. The baby is ours. I can't believe we're finally going to be a family. Tonight was torture pretending. My fingers went numb. I scrolled up through months of messages. Declarations of love, complaints about having to hide their relationship, plans for a future together. Photos I couldn't bring myself to look at closely. The shower shut off upstairs. I took screenshots methodically, texting them to my personal email address, then deleted the sent messages from his phone. My hands were steady now, working on autopilot while my brain screamed. I placed his phone exactly where he'd left it and poured his coffee. When Lance came downstairs, I smiled at him. "Sleep well?" I asked, my voice perfectly normal. He kissed my cheek, taking the mug. "Like a rock, you!" "Great," I lied, watching him drink his coffee and check his phone, completely unaware that I now knew everything. I went to work that Tuesday and functioned like a robot. I smiled at clients, coordinated a conference setup, approved catering menus, and didn't feel anything at all. The shock had wrapped around me like armor, holding all the pain at bay. During my lunch break, I sat in my car and finally let myself think. Stella's pregnancy timeline meant the affair had been going on for at least 3 months, probably longer. The baby she'd announced so joyfully wasn't some mysterious boyfriend's child. It was Lance's. My husband had got my sister pregnant while I was traveling for work, probably in our house, maybe even in our bed. The thought made my stomach heave. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. They'd looked me in the eye last night and lied. They'd let our parents celebrate, let everyone make plans, knowing the truth would destroy our family. I pulled out my phone and opened a new note, starting to document everything I could remember. Every suspicious moment I dismissed. Every time Stella had been at our house when I returned from trips. Every late night Lance claimed to be working. The affair had been happening right in front of me, and I'd been too trusting to see it. That ended now. That evening, Lance suggested dinner at Marco's, our favorite Italian restaurant. I agreed pleasantly, playing the role of unsuspecting wife. Over pasta, he talked about a new project at his architecture firm, some commercial building downtown. I nodded in the right places, asked appropriate questions, and watched him lie by omission. "Your sister seems really happy about the baby," he said casually, twirling linguine on his fork. "Yeah," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "It's exciting." Though she still hasn't told us who the father is. Lance's fork paused halfway to his mouth just for a second. "Probably that guy from her work she mentioned a few times, the sales manager." "Maybe," I said lightly. "Strange she's being so secretive about it, though, makes you wonder." He shifted in his seat, suddenly focused on his meal. "People have their reasons. She'll tell everyone when she's ready." I smiled and changed the subject, asking about his mother's upcoming birthday. The conversation moved on, but I'd seen that flicker of panic in his eyes. Good. Let him worry. Let him wonder if I suspected anything. I had no plan yet, just raw pain and growing anger, but I knew one thing for certain. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't scream. I would be strategic. Next morning, I called Veronica Chen, the best divorce attorney in Riverside. I'd coordinated her firm's holiday party 2 years ago, and we'd stayed friendly. Her secretary put me through immediately. "Helena, wonderful to hear from you. What can I do for you?" Veronica's voice was warm and professional. I explained the situation calmly, as if discussing someone else's life. My husband was having an affair with my sister. She was pregnant with his child. I had screenshots of their messages. I wanted to know my options. There was a pause. "Can you come in today? I have an opening at 3. That afternoon, I sat in Veronica's sleek office overlooking downtown Riverside. She reviewed the screenshots I'd forwarded, her expression carefully neutral. "This is substantial evidence of infidelity," she said finally. "Oregon is a no-fault divorce state, but this documentation will be valuable for the division of assets and any potential spousal support negotiations. The house is in both our names," I explained. "We have joint bank accounts, joint investments. Everything's tangled together." Veronica made notes on her legal pad. "How long have you been married?" 8 years. "And you've been the primary breadwinner?" I nodded. "My salary is higher. I also inherited money from my grandmother 3 years ago. I kept it in a separate account, but I used some of it for our house renovations." Veronica leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. "The inheritance you kept separate remains yours. Any portion you contributed to joint property becomes more complicated. We'll need detailed financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, credit card bills, everything." I'd come prepared. I pulled out a folder containing 6 months of statements I'd quietly printed at work. Veronica's eyebrow raised slightly. "You've been thinking about this?" "Since yesterday," I admitted. "But I've always kept good records, occupational habit." She flipped through the documents, her expression sharpening. "There are some irregular charges here, hotels, restaurants, gifts, all on your joint credit card." "I noticed those last night," I said. "I was traveling for work during most of those dates." "He was using marital funds to conduct his affair," Veronica said. "That strengthens your position considerably. Oregon courts take a dim view of dissipating marital assets for extramarital relationships." She continued reviewing the statements, occasionally making notes. Finally, she looked up. "Here's what I recommend. First, we document everything. Second, you open individual accounts and begin separating your finances. Third, you do not confront either of them until we have a complete picture of your assets and a strategy in place." "How long will that take?" I asked. 2 weeks, maybe 3. "Can you maintain normalcy that long?" I thought about watching Lance smile at me while lying, about Stella calling me excited about baby names. "Yes," I said, "I can do that." I left Veronica's office with a plan and a strange sense of calm. The shock was wearing off, replaced by cold determination. That evening, I told Lance I needed to visit our branch office in Portland for a few days. He accepted the lie easily, probably relieved to have me gone. I did go to Portland, but not for work. I went to open new bank accounts at institutions Lance didn't use. I transferred my salary direct deposit. I moved half our joint savings to my new account, exactly what I was entitled to. I documented everything with timestamps and screenshots. Veronica had been clear about protecting myself financially without overstepping legal boundaries. Back home on Friday, I found Stella's car in our driveway. She was in our kitchen, making tea like she owned the place. "Helena, you're back early," she said, startled. Meetings wrapped up faster than expected, I replied, setting down my bag. What brings you by? Just wanted to talk about baby stuff. Lance said you wouldn't mind. Of course he had. Where is Lance? I asked casually. He ran to the store, should be back soon. We stood in my kitchen, my sister and I, with this terrible secret between us. She knew I didn't know, I knew everything. The power dynamic had shifted and she had no idea. So have you thought about names? I asked, pouring myself water. Stella relaxed, launching into a discussion about baby names she liked. I listened and nodded, watching her carefully. She was showing now, just slightly, her hand occasionally moving to her stomach in that unconscious gesture pregnant women make. My sister was carrying my husband's child, and she stood in my kitchen talking about it like everything was normal. Have you told Mom and Dad who the father is yet? I asked, keeping my voice light and curious. She hesitated, her smile faltering. Not yet. It's complicated. Complicated how? She turned away, suddenly focused on her tea. He's not in a position to be public about it yet, work stuff, you know how it is. The lies came so easily to her, I wondered how long she'd been practicing them. That sounds difficult, I said sympathetically. Being pregnant and not being able to share it fully with your partner. It is, she admitted, and for a moment she looked genuinely troubled. But it'll all work out soon. He's planning to make some changes, then everything will be different. Changes, like divorcing me, like destroying our family so they could play house together. Lance came through the door then, carrying grocery bags. He froze when he saw me, his eyes darting between Stella and me. Hey, you're home, he said, his voice slightly too loud. Stella stopped by. So I see, I replied, smiling. I was just hearing about her baby name ideas. Lance set the bags on the counter, not meeting my eyes. That's great, I should probably get started on dinner. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Stella picked up her purse quickly. I should go anyway. Thanks for the chat, Helena. I walked her to the door, giving her a hug goodbye like I always did. She felt stiff in my arms, probably guilt making her uncomfortable. Good. After she left, I helped Lance unpack groceries in silence. She's been coming around a lot lately, I commented casually. She's excited about the baby. Needs someone to talk to, I guess. I put pasta in the cabinet. It's nice that you're being so supportive. Not every guy would want his sister-in-law hanging around all the time. She's family, Lance said, his back to me. Of course I'm supportive. I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I changed the subject to my Portland trip, making up details about meetings and client complaints. Lance seemed relieved to talk about something else. We made dinner together like we had hundreds of times before, moving around each other in practiced coordination. On the surface, we looked like any normal married couple. Underneath, I was counting down the days until I could drop the bomb that would destroy his carefully constructed lies. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I smiled and laughed and acted normal while quietly building my case. I met with Veronica twice more, bringing additional documentation each time. She helped me understand exactly what I was entitled to in the divorce and how to protect my interests. I tracked every movement of our joint funds, every suspicious charge, every late-night Lance claimed to be working. I installed a tracking app on his phone one morning while he showered, using a technique I'd found online. The app showed me everywhere he went. 3 times that week, he went to Stella's apartment. Once for 3 hours in the middle of a workday. I documented it all. I also started working on something else, something Veronica didn't know about yet. Lance's architecture firm had a strict ethics policy about relationships that could create conflicts of interest. I'd read the employee handbook when he first started there, bored one evening while he worked late. Stella's pharmaceutical company supplied medications to several medical offices in buildings Lance's firm had designed. Their relationship could be seen as a conflict of interest, maybe even grounds for termination if reported properly, but I didn't share that information yet. I wanted to save some surprises. On Wednesday, Mom called to invite us for Sunday dinner. I'm making Stella's favorite, she said. She's been having terrible morning sickness. I want to cheer her up. Sunday dinner at my parents' house felt like walking into a trap I'd set for myself. Stella was already there when Lance and I arrived, looking pale but happy. Mom fussed over her. Dad joked about being a grandfather, and I sat at the table wondering how they'd all react when they learned the truth. You're being so quiet tonight, Dad commented, passing me the salad. Just tired from work, I said. Busy season. Lance's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently. A gesture that used to comfort me now made my skin crawl. I squeezed back, playing my part. After dinner, Mom pulled out baby magazines and Stella started showing everyone nursery ideas. Lance leaned forward, genuinely interested, offering opinions on colors and furniture. Watching him plan for a child with my sister while sitting beside me was surreal. "What do you think, Helena?" Stella asked, showing me a photo of a white crib. "It's beautiful," I replied automatically. "You'll be such a good mother." Her eyes met mine, and I saw something flicker there. Guilt, fear, whatever it was, she looked away quickly. "I hope so," she said quietly. Mom launched into a story about when Stella and I were Bobbies, how different we'd been from the start. I'd been serious and careful. Stella had been wild and fearless. "Some things never change," I murmured, and Stella's head snapped up, but I was already smiling blandly. Monday morning, I sat in Veronica's office for what I knew would be our final planning session. "I'm ready," I told her. "I want to move forward." She reviewed the documentation we'd compiled, screenshots of messages, financial records showing Lance spending marital money on the affair, GPS tracking showing him at Stella's apartment, credit card charges for hotels and gifts, bank statements I'd separated and secured. "This is comprehensive," Veronica said with approval. "When do you want to serve him?" "Friday," I replied. "I want to do it somewhere public, somewhere they'll both be." She frowned slightly. "That's not typically how we handle service of process. It's usually done privately to avoid unnecessary drama." "I understand," I said, "but my husband announced my sister's pregnancy at a family dinner, knowing that baby was his. They've been lying to my face for months. They've made a fool of me in front of everyone I love. I think I've earned the right to a little drama." Veronica studied me for a long moment. "What did you have in mind?" I explained my plan. Friday was my parents' anniversary, 37 years of marriage. We were all going to dinner at Belmore, the nicest restaurant in town. Mom had been planning it for weeks. Everyone would be there. Family, close friends, my parents' entire social circle, the perfect audience. "You want to serve him at your parents' anniversary dinner," Veronica said slowly. "Yes," I confirmed, "and I want to do it myself. Legally, can I hand him the papers directly?" Veronica leaned back, considering. "Technically, you can't serve your own spouse divorce papers in Oregon. It needs to be done by a disinterested third party, but I can have a process server pose as a waiter. He can hand Lance the envelope during dinner." I smiled. "That works even better." We finalized the details. The process server would be there at 8 o'clock, exactly when dessert was being served. Maximum impact. Veronica pulled out the completed divorce petition for my review. Reading the legal language made it real in a way nothing else had. Irreconcilable differences seemed too bland for betrayal this deep. "There's one more thing," I said. "I need your advice on something legally sensitive." I explained what I'd discovered about the potential conflict of interest between Lance's firm and Stella's company, about the employee handbook policies, about the contracts I'd found in Lance's home office that mentioned Stella's company specifically. Veronica's expression sharpened with interest. "You're thinking of reporting this to his employer?" "After the divorce is filed," I confirmed. "I don't want it to look retaliatory or interfere with the legal process. But yes, eventually." She made notes. "That's separate from the divorce proceedings. You'd be within your rights to report a legitimate conflict of interest, though the timing will raise eyebrows." Friday arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a deep blue dress Lance had always liked. I did my makeup perfectly, straightened my hair, wore the diamond earrings he'd given me for our 5th anniversary. I wanted to look good for this. Lance complimented me when I came downstairs, smiling that smile I'd once loved. We drove to Belmore together, making small talk about his work and the anniversary party. He had no idea what was coming. We arrived to find the private dining room already filling with guests. Mom looked beautiful in champagne silk, Dad distinguished in his navy suit. Stella was there too, of course, wearing a flowing dress that hid her growing belly. She waved when she saw us, her smile bright and fake. I waved back, matching her energy. The evening progressed like any family celebration. Drinks and appetizers, laughter and stories. I sat beside Lance, playing the devoted wife one final time. Stella sat across from us, occasionally catching Lance's eye. Those private glances they thought no one noticed, but I noticed everything now. At 8 o'clock, as dessert was being served, a young man in a waiter's uniform approached our table. "Mr. Lance Mercer," he asked politely. Lance looked up, surprised. "Yes, these are for you, sir." The process server placed a manila envelope beside Lance's plate. Then he turned and walked away before anyone could react. Lance stared at the envelope like it might bite him. The table had gone quiet. "What is that?" Mom asked, curious. "I don't know," Lance said slowly. He picked up the envelope, opened it, and pulled out the papers inside. I watched his face drain of color as he read the first page, petition for dissolution of marriage. His eyes shot to mine, shock and panic written clearly across his features. "Helena." "What? I'm divorcing you," I said calmly, loud enough for everyone at the table to hear. "I've known about your affair with my sister for 2 weeks now. I know the baby she's carrying is yours, and I'm done pretending I don't." The silence was deafening. Stella made a choking sound, my mother gasped. My father half stood from his chair, face red with confusion and growing anger. Lance tried to speak, but nothing came out. You knew," Stella finally managed. "Of course I knew," I replied, looking at her directly. "I saw your messages. The baby is ours. I can't believe we're finally going to be a family. Ring any bells?" Her hand moved instinctively to her stomach, protective. Around us, our parents' guests were staring, whispers starting to spread through the room like wildfire. This was what I wanted, everyone knowing. No more secrets, no more lies. "Helena, please," Lance found his voice. "Not here, not like this." "Why not?" I asked pleasantly. "You didn't mind lying to my face at this very table weeks ago when Stella announced her pregnancy. You didn't mind spending our money on hotel rooms." Dad's voice cut through the chaos. "What the hell is going on?" He looked between Lance, Stella, and me, trying to understand. Mom had gone pale, one hand pressed to her mouth. "Lance and Stella have been having an affair," I explained clearly, looking at my parents. "For at least 6 months, probably longer. The baby Stella's pregnant with isn't from some mysterious boyfriend. It's Lance's child." "That's not," Stella started, but Dad cut her off with a look. "Is this true?" he demanded, looking at Lance. Lance's mouth opened and closed. The divorce papers trembled in his hands. Beside me, I could feel him falling apart, the secret he'd protected so carefully exploding in the worst possible way. "Answer him," I said quietly. "Is the baby yours?" "Yes," Lance whispered finally. "The baby is mine." Mom made a sound like she'd been physically struck. Around us, the whispers grew louder. My parents' friends, people who'd known our family for decades, watching the drama unfold like a train wreck they couldn't look away from. Stella started crying, mascara running down her face. "We didn't mean for it to happen, it just did." "For 6 months?" I asked, my voice still eerily calm. "You accidentally fell into bed with my husband repeatedly for 6 months?" She flinched like I'd slapped her. "Good." Dad looked at his youngest daughter with an expression I'd never seen before. Disappointment so deep it was almost disgust. "How could you?" he asked quietly. "Your own sister." "Sorry," Stella sobbed. "I'm so sorry, Helena, I never wanted to hurt you." "But you did it anyway," I replied. "Over and over, in my house, in my bed, using my trust against me." Lance finally found some words. "Helena, if we could just talk privately." "No," I cut him off. "I'm done with private conversations where you lie to my face. Everything's public now. That's what you both wanted, right? To be together openly, to be a family." I looked around at the stunned faces watching us. "Well, congratulations. Now everyone knows." Mom was crying now too, Dad's arm around her shoulders. Their anniversary celebration had turned into a nightmare. I felt a flicker of guilt about that, but pushed it aside. This wasn't my fault. "I think we should leave," I said, standing up. "I've ruined enough of Mom and Dad's evening." "Helena, wait," Dad started, but I shook my head. "I'll call you tomorrow. Tonight I just need to go home." I looked at Lance one last time. "Your things will be packed by Monday. Pick them up when I'm at work. Don't try to contact me except through my attorney. Her information is in those papers." Then I walked out of Belmore with my head high, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage, my family, and Lance's carefully constructed lies. Outside, the cool night air hit my face. My hands were shaking now, adrenaline and emotion finally breaking through the calm facade I'd maintained. But I'd done it. I drove home and sat in my car in the driveway for a long time, processing what had just happened. My phone buzzed constantly with texts and calls. I ignored all of them. Inside the house that had been ours, I poured a large glass of wine and finally let myself feel everything I'd been holding back. The betrayal, the hurt, the anger. I cried for the marriage I'd thought I had, for the future children I'd imagined having with Lance, for the relationship with my sister that was destroyed beyond repair. But underneath the pain was something else. Relief, freedom, The exhausting work of pretending was over. No more fake smiles or carefully controlled reactions. No more watching them look at each other when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Around midnight, my doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole to see my parents standing on the porch. I opened the door. "We sent everyone home," Mom said quietly. "Can we come in?" We sat in the living room where Stella had sat drinking tea weeks ago, where Lance had pretended everything was normal, where our family had gathered for countless dinners and holidays back when I'd believed we were happy. "I'm sorry I ruined your anniversary," I said first. "Nonsense," Dad replied firmly. "This isn't your fault. None of this is your fault." Mom reached over and took my hand. "Why didn't you tell us when you found out?" "I needed time to protect myself legally," I explained, "to make sure Lance couldn't take advantage of me financially." I showed them some of the documentation I'd gathered, the messages, the credit card statements showing Lance spending our money on his affair, the evidence of them meeting while I was traveling for work. Mom's hands shook as she read her youngest daughter's words. "I can't believe Stella would do this. You're her sister. She's loved you her whole life." "Apparently not enough," I replied. We talked for hours. They asked questions I answered as honestly as I could. Finally, around 3 in the morning, Dad stood up. "We're going home now. You should try to get some sleep." He hugged me tightly. "We're proud of you for standing up for yourself, and we're ashamed of your sister." After they left, I went upstairs to the bedroom I'd shared with Lance. The bed suddenly looked enormous and empty. I pulled out my phone and finally checked my messages. There were dozens from Stella, from Lance, from concerned friends who'd heard what happened, from my boss checking if I was okay. One message stood out. It was from Veronica. "I heard about tonight. Impressive execution. Call me Monday and we'll discuss next steps." I smiled slightly. Monday couldn't come fast enough. The weekend passed in a strange blur. Lance didn't come home. I learned later he'd checked into a hotel, probably too ashamed to face me or unsure of what to say. Good. Let him be uncomfortable for once. Stella tried, calling 23 times on Saturday. On Sunday morning, she showed up at the house. I watched through the window as she rang the doorbell repeatedly, crying on my porch. I didn't answer. Eventually she left, but not before shoving a letter through the mail slot. I left it sitting on the floor unopened. I wasn't ready to read her excuses. By Sunday evening, the story had spread through our entire social circle. My phone filled with messages from friends offering support, expressing shock, asking if I needed anything. Several women I knew reached out to share their own stories of betrayal. It turned out I wasn't as alone as I'd felt. Monday morning, I went to work with my head high. My boss pulled me aside first thing. "Helena, take whatever time you need. Family leave, personal days, whatever you need." "I'd rather work," I replied honestly. "Sitting at home will just make me think too much." She nodded understanding. "The offer stands if you change your mind." That afternoon, I met with Veronica again. "The divorce is proceeding," she told me. "Lance's attorney reached out this morning. They're proposing a settlement conference next week." "Already?" I was surprised. "He wants this resolved quickly and quietly. After Friday night's public scene, he's motivated to cooperate." Veronica smiled slightly. "Your dramatic reveal, while unconventional, has put you in a strong negotiating position." We discussed the terms I was willing to accept. The house would be mine. He'd buy out my half of his retirement accounts. I'd keep my inheritance separate. We'd split other joint assets 50-50. "And the conflict of interest issue?" Veronica asked. I'd been thinking about that carefully. "I'm going to report it after the divorce is final, not as revenge, but because it's genuinely unethical. Other people at his firm deserve to know about the potential conflicts." Veronica nodded. "Just be prepared for how it might look publicly." "After Friday night, I don't think my reputation can get much worse," I replied dryly. That evening, I finally opened Stella's letter. It was 5 pages long, filled with apologies and explanations. She claimed the affair had started during a low point after her broken engagement. That Lance had been kind to her, that feelings had developed gradually, that she'd never meant to hurt me. She wrote about how guilty she felt, how the secret had eaten at her. She begged for forgiveness, for a chance to explain in person. She said she still loved me as her sister. I read the entire thing once, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday I'd be ready to hear her excuses, but not today, not soon. On Wednesday, Lance tried to come to the house. I'd changed the locks. He knocked for 10 minutes before finally giving up and calling my phone. I didn't answer. His voicemail was brief. "I know you hate me. I hate myself too. But we need to talk about dividing our things. Please, Helena, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His voice cracked on the last word. Too little, too late. The settlement conference happened the following Tuesday. I sat across a conference table from Lance for the first time since Friday night. He looked terrible. Unshaven, exhausted, wearing a wrinkled shirt. Good. Veronica had prepped me thoroughly. We'd walk in with our demands, they'd counter, and we'd negotiate until reaching something both sides could accept. Lance's attorney started by proposing terms that would leave him with far more than he deserved. Veronica shut that down immediately, presenting our documented evidence of his misconduct and financial malfeasance. "Your client spent marital funds to conduct an affair," she stated calmly. "He misled my client about family finances while diverting money to his girlfriend. These factors significantly impact our position on asset division." Lance's attorney backpedaled quickly. Over the next 3 hours, we hammered out terms. I got the house, my car, and 70% of our joint savings. Lance kept his retirement accounts but had to buy out my half. We split other assets and debts evenly. I'd keep my grandmother's inheritance completely separate, as it should have been all along. By the end, Lance looked defeated. "This is fair," Veronica told me privately during a break. "You're getting what you deserve without appearing vindictive." When it was time to sign the preliminary agreement, Lance finally spoke directly to me. "I really am sorry, Helena. I know that doesn't change anything, but it's true." I looked at him across the table, this man I'd loved for 8 years. "You're right," I replied. "It doesn't change anything." The divorce would be final in 90 days, standard waiting period in Oregon. In the meantime, Lance was officially out of my house and my life. I started the process of rebuilding. I took up painting classes on Wednesday evenings, something I'd always wanted to try. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my marriage. I threw myself into work, earning praise for a corporate event I coordinated flawlessly despite everything happening in my personal life. My relationship with my parents slowly healed. They were devastated by Stella's betrayal, struggling to reconcile the daughter they'd raised with the woman who'd done something so cruel. "We're not speaking to her right now," Mom told me over lunch. "We need time to process this." I understood that feeling perfectly. 6 weeks after the settlement conference, I filed the formal complaint with Lance's architecture firm about the conflict of interest. I provided documentation showing the business relationships between his projects and Stella's pharmaceutical company. I included dates showing when their personal relationship had begun and how it overlapped with professional dealings. The firm took it seriously. An internal investigation was launched. Within 2 weeks, Lance was placed on administrative leave. I didn't take pleasure in that exactly, but I didn't feel guilty either. Actions had consequences. 3 months after that disastrous anniversary dinner, my divorce from Lance became final. I signed the papers in Veronica's office, officially ending our 8-year marriage. "How do you feel?" Veronica asked after the notary finished. "Free," I replied, and I meant it. I'd heard through the grapevine that Stella had her baby, a girl. Lance had apparently moved in with her, playing happy family in her small apartment. His architecture firm hadn't fired him but had transferred him to a different division with less client contact. His career trajectory had stalled considerably. My parents still weren't speaking to Stella. The betrayal had cut too deep for easy forgiveness. Maybe someday that would change. Maybe not. I was doing okay. Better than okay, actually. I'd gotten a promotion at work. I'd started dating someone new, taking things slowly, but enjoying the attention from someone who actually valued me. I'd redecorated the house, erasing traces of Lance and making it fully mine. Sometimes I thought about what might have happened if I'd never seen those text messages, if I'd stayed ignorant while they carried on their affair. The thought made me shudder. I was grateful I'd discovered the truth, even though it hurt. Sitting in my living room one evening, glass of wine in hand, I thought about everything that had changed. My sister had destroyed our relationship for a man. Lance had destroyed our marriage for excitement. And I discovered I was strong enough to walk away from both of them. Nothing was ever the same after that anniversary dinner, but sometimes different was better.